something I have to do, and I have to see it through and finish it. And I'm hoping that the positives that could potentially come out of it would outweigh the personal cost. By that I mean that the positives that other people take from reading it who aren't, immediately involved, that they may get something from it and go, well, hang on a second, my life's like that, and I think like that, and so it's fine to think like that. It's almost like giving people permission to realize that they're like everybody else in a lot of ways, because there's all the things that we all do in our lives that everybody can think of something that they've done that they're so toe-curlingly ashamed of, that or they think that they've broken the law, or they think that this thing has been like the most immoral thing they could possibly have done. And the kind of thing that would bring down the absolute it's not really anger, it would bring down colossal disapproval from their peers, and it would affect their social standing amongst their peers. Everybody's got things like that, but they don't want to verbalize them and they don't want to express them. And maybe by writing those things, from my point of view, then other people can go, okay, it's all right. That thing I did 20 years ago that still gnaws at me doesn't actually matter. So that's maybe one of the benefits. I mean, maybe I'm blowing smoke up my own arse thinking that, and that all I'm doing is a colossally egocentric splurge of just, whatever's going on in my head that isn't going to do anybody any good and will end up making me a friendless loser sitting in a room on my own, with nobody wanting to speak to me. But
oh man, it's almost like you're ahead of me in terms of where I'm going, because you literally just answered my next question, which I understand the need to want to, put this on paper and find your own truth, but why make it public? Why let those people have access to where they can read it? And you literally just answered that question. So
yeah, I mean, there's another element to it as well. There's the that kind of almost. Again, this is the thing, because I'm having to think it through whether what my motives are for it. And this is what it's caused me to do a lot of the time, is that since I've started writing, I now consider, am I thinking this way because of this or that? I've just spun it as if it could hopefully be an altruistic thing that could help other people, but it might just be this complete attention-seeking arrogance. And, the, hey, look at me, read this, learn all about my amazing life. And it could be that. And I'm kind of conscious that could be part of what's going on there. I hope it isn't, but there's a chance that it is.
That's very honest.
And it's a very self-centered thing to do. It's a very selfish thing to do. And I can try and paint it as being selfless as much as I want and say, oh, it's this noble thing I'm doing for the betterment of mankind. It probably isn't. It's probably something that I'm doing entirely for myself that runs the risk of genuinely hurting other people. But I'm still going to do it even knowing that. And that almost makes it worse in a way, that I'm aware that it could hurt people and I'm still doing it.
But I think that, like I said, I've gone back and forth on both ends of the spectrum. But ultimately, what I came down on is that yes, it may hurt. It may hurt some people. Yes, some people may not like what it says. But ultimately, everyone has the situations that you're in, the situations where you think something and you don't say it out loud, but you're still thinking it. And I don't care who you are or where you come from, what you believe. Everyone has had that happen to them. So where they might get mad at you for that just being whatever that situation was, ultimately they've had, similar thoughts or similar situations or, periods where something's happened and they didn't say what they were thinking. So really, I mean, no one can get mad at you if you think about it that way.
Well, let's hope so. It's a tricky one. While you were saying that, I was just trying to think about how people can feel about it and who's involved. And I am conscious that even with this first draft of it, when, this is really kind of like the blast it all out and then go back over it stage, I'm still doing a little bit of trying to pull my punches with some people. Again, but then the other side of it as well is that I'm conscious that I'm writing things that literally nobody knew until I wrote them down. Things that were complete secrets, usually between me and one other person, and things that were kept secret. And that's going to get worse as things go on. And there's going to be more of that kind of thing because, again, this is something that people may have taken me into their confidence over things. But if I then decide to write about that, then I'm betraying the confidence. But it's a difficult one because I guess I'll have to wait up on a case by case basis. But I'm conscious that there are going to be certain events that only me and one other person are aware of. And it's not one specific person. It's various different people throughout my lives in these situations. But yeah, there's going to be that where if I read somebody writing things that I'd done without my permission, then I'd possibly get quite upset about it. It's a really tricky one, Carl. I'm not.
It is. It's fascinating.
I'm just shooting myself.
I think that I just what you're doing, I think, brings up a conversation that people could just have for hours. The entire idea of it, I just think, is genius in a way, and also suicidal.
Yeah, it's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. Over the years, I've done lots and lots of kind of various creative projects, visual art and music and things like that. And this is the first thing I've done that actually scares me.
And those are the things, though, that people remember and that change things. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's where what you're going to find. Like an idea like this is something that is so radical and just something that people would just never do, because why would you do that? And I think that's going to really kind of resonate with people. And one of the things that I like about it the most is kind of the honest dialogue that you have with yourself, because there's a back and forth that goes on with yourself. Yeah, well, it's it's something I made a decision to do, that when I reached certain points, if I found myself thinking a certain thing about it as I wrote it, I would then follow that thought and I'd write that down and kind of question myself, in real time while I was writing, and kind of go back and saying, well, do we think this way? Is this something that should be done? I think there's one bit, and I don't know if it's in the part you've got or later, where I write something and then the next, and I felt what I'd written was weirdly clunky and very oddly worded. And I write saying that last bit was weird. Yep. It's almost as much about writing as everything else. It's about the act of writing, and it drops into the present day in some points, and I write about the events that are happening to me on the day that I'm writing it, and then it drops back into something 25 years ago or 30 years ago or whatever. So it's it's kind of hops back and forth, but I've tried to keep it fairly chronological. But there's that kind of inner dialogue thing going on. What jumped out to me was kind of a feeling that goes along with the theme of the entire project. Mm-hmm. Your dialogue with yourself is almost sometimes questioning why you're saying this out loud. Yeah, I could have just gone very kind of straightforward. I did this, then I did this, then I did this, then I did this. And I would find that boring to read. So I'm kind of conscious that, there's certain things that I've not written about. I've not written about every single thing I've ever done. And there's no doubt as I go on with it, I may find myself leaving out things that really mean something special to me. Because I want to keep them as something special, which weirdly would kind of defeat the object of it, because if I then, go senile in my old age, those really precious memories will be lost to me. So maybe I should put them all in. But I'm having to walk that line between how much of myself am I willing to share and how much of myself do I want to keep for myself afterwards. It finishes... It's not something that I'm going to keep on going as a day-to-day thing once I hit the present day. There's a distinct end point that I've got in mind for it. So everything past that point will still be mine, but everything up to that point will kind of effectively have become almost some public domain. It'll be just given out to everybody, and there's nothing remotely special or different about my life than anybody else's. But I'm hoping that if people do read it, they'll realise that their lives are special in a way that everybody's is. That day-to-day mundane stories of what we do with our lives are actually, they're kind of, when we look back at them, we kind of see them as a narrative, and we imagine the shape of our lives as a narrative, and
maybe it'll help people kind of go, okay, yeah, it's all right for me to feel like that.
I think because it's something that you're not used to reading, that level of honesty. So to be able to kind of be it was like literally being Alex Botten for.
Yeah, I'm glad that's what's coming across, because that's part of what I'm wanting it to do, is to kind of give people an insight into what it's like to be somebody else.
Now, let's talk about some particular parts of the book. One of the things that, just as an aside note, I find a sign of the times, I guess, if you will, the story of Mr. Lunt.
Yes. He was my teacher in my second year of junior school. So that would have been my 6th year in education. So what would I have been? Maybe 10 at that age, or maybe 9 or 10. And there was a guy in the class called Barry. And I won't use his surname in this because I don't know whether I'll keep it in the book as that. But we'll just refer to him as Barry at the moment. And Barry was quite a troubled kid and had come from a kind of school that had a reputation for having troubled kids. And he would rile Mr. Lunt quite regularly, and he was quite a kind of aggressive kid. And one day he pushed Mr. Lunt to breaking point, which, to the shock of myself and my classmates, Mr. Lunt just kind of vaulted over this table, grabbed Barry and sort of smacked him against the wall. And everybody was like, whoa. And Barry got sent off to the headmaster, and there was a dent in the wall in the panel because he'd really bashed him hard against it. And he practically, I think he'd almost gone to punch him and had punched the wall instead to stop himself. But he was a very mild-mannered, middle-aged man, grey hair, quite a kind of dowdy-looking fella, and he just lost it just for those few moments.
Today, that would not be anywhere close. Well, as a matter of fact, he didn't even get reprimanded, did he? He didn't get suspended or anything.
No, Barry didn't get suspended. Mr. Lunt didn't get suspended.
That's insane.
It was just, yeah. I mean, it was a different world. I mean, that would have been the early 80s, and it was a very, very different. I don't know, there were certain things you could get away with as a teacher that now there'd be no hope of getting away with those things.
No.
But and I suppose kids today have no comprehension that their teachers could have been like that. And, maybe they're kind of awful to their teachers now. And the teachers aren't in a situation to be able to kind of impress their authority upon the kids,
right,
because they don't have the free reign that they had back in the 70s and 80s, 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s. I think it's right that teachers aren't, slamming children into walls. This is a grown, middle-aged man smacking a 8 or 9-year-old into a wall. There's no justification for that. But at the same time, it's what happened. And you can understand it from his point of view that he lost it. His kid that was needling him and needling him and needling him. There was wrong on both sides. But yeah, there's just no way the teacher would be suspended or fired nowadays. I
wonder, it makes me wonder if, how that ultimately affects how they are as adults. You know what I mean? Like, while I don't feel that you should, be slamming kids against walls, I almost feel like that was like a wake up call maybe for Barry, and he may have had a change in, attitude and how he acted towards people of authority. But nowadays, everything is so, bubble wrapped. And I wonder if that's going to mold a generation of just people who run over everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy because, I suppose it puts you in a situation where if everybody's quite kind of polite to each other and very much consider the feelings of the people all the time and try not to get into confrontations, the minority of people who don't care about that kind of thing are, as you say, can be just able to ride roughshod over everybody and steamroller their way into being in positions of power and bullying people and stuff. And it may lead to a generation where they haven't got the toolkit to deal with bullying, that they don't know how to deal with it or how to deal with aggression from somebody else.
Right.
And we'll just go, oh, no, you can't do this. And I think it's something that comes out a lot with the way, some people talk about social justice warriors and their need for safe spaces. I think there's an element of this idea that people are too mollycoddled. But then are we thinking that in light of our own upbringings? I can't even begin to imagine what it must be like being a child now or being a teenager now. I'm certainly, from the point of view of being in secondary school now or high school in the States, I hate that now. if I was going through that now with the internet and, all these ways of, the bullying comes home with you.
Very good point.
And, you start getting WhatsApp messages in the middle of the night from people calling you names and stuff. And it must be appalling. Whereas when I was at school, you left it, you got home and you were in your safe home environment.
Very good point.
And that doesn't exist anymore.